The real reason Felipe Massa never became world champion. For 39 seconds, Felipe Massa was the Formula One world champion. He crossed the finish line at Interlagos. His home crowd, 70,000 Brazilians who had waited their whole lives for this, erupted into something close to madness. His father collapsed on the pit wall. His engineers screamed until their voices broke, and Felipe, still in the car, helmet still on, punched the air with his whole body, with every piece of himself he had left. For 39 seconds, a kid from São Paulo had done what only 2 Brazilians before him had done. He had won the Formula One World Championship. Then Lewis Hamilton passed Timo Glock on the final corner of the final lap of the final race of the season. And just like that, it was gone. 1 point, 1 corner, 1 moment that took everything. But here's what the highlights package never tells you. That finish line in Brazil was not where Felipe Massa's championship was lost. It was just where it was confirmed. The real story, the real reason Massa never lifted that trophy, was written across 18 races, in boardrooms and pit lanes and rain-soaked night circuits, long before the last lap in São Paulo. And when you understand the full story, the tragedy gets deeper, not shallower. To understand why Massa fell short, you have to understand who he was as a driver, because the championship fight he found himself in demanded something specific from him, and the answer to whether he had it is complicated. Felipe Massa was not a driver who won through calculation. He wasn't Prost, picking his moments, protecting his tires, managing the gap. He wasn't Schumacher, cold and methodical, draining the emotion out of racing until it became engineering. Massa was fire. He was instinct. He was the kind of driver who could put a lap together on Saturday afternoon that made the entire paddock stop and stare, because nobody quite knew how he had done it. At his best, Massa was genuinely brilliant, not almost brilliant, not nearly there. The 2006 Brazilian Grand Prix, where he won at home in front of his nation while Schumacher's championship unraveled, that was a masterclass. Clean, dominant, emotionally enormous. He carried it perfectly. By 2008, he was 27 years old, in the prime of his physical abilities, inside the most iconic team in the sport, driving the F2008, a car that Ferrari had built to win championships. And he did win. 6 races. More victories than Lewis Hamilton that season. 6 wins, and still no title. So what went wrong? 3 things, and they don't exist in isolation. They compound each other, building pressure until the final lap in Brazil becomes almost inevitable in hindsight. The first reason is the one that lives inside the walls of Maranello, and Ferrari fans have spent 17 years not wanting to look at it directly. For the critical middle portion of the 2008 season, Ferrari did not run a unified championship campaign behind Felipe Massa. Kimi Räikkönen arrived in 2008 as the reigning world champion. He had delivered for Ferrari in 2007 in the most dramatic fashion, coming from behind, winning the final race, pipping Hamilton and Alonso in a 3-way finale that still doesn't seem real. Kimi was their champion. Their investment? The man they had paid an enormous sum to bring from McLaren. And so when Massa began outperforming Räikkönen race after race through the middle of the year, the internal shift inside Ferrari was slow, slower than it needed to be. The team kept options open for Kimi longer than the mathematics warranted. Strategy was sometimes split. Resources were sometimes divided. Now, it is fair to say that Ferrari did eventually consolidate behind Massa as the season entered its final stretch. That is true. But in a championship decided by a single point, eventually is a word that costs everything. Compare that to McLaren. Whatever you think of McLaren's 2008 operation, and it was not always clean, they ran Hamilton's title bid in the back half of the season with ruthless, focused clarity. Every pit call, every tire decision, every strategy board. It was built around one goal, one driver, one championship. Ferrari hedged, and in Formula One, hedging at the wrong moment is how you lose by 1 point. Raikkonen scored 75 points that year, points that, in a different team structure, could have been clean air and strategic priority for Massa when he needed it most. That is not Kimi's fault. That is a management question, and the answer to that question cost Massa the title. The second reason is harder to say out loud because it asks something uncomfortable of the narrative. Felipe Massa gave away points he never should have lost. And in a season that came down to one, those points are not footnotes. They are the championship. Bahrain, the opening races. Chances to build a lead that were not fully taken. The European Grand Prix in Valencia. A spin under pressure in a moment where consistency was worth more than any single fast lap. But the single most pivotal race of the entire 2008 season was not in Brazil. It was not at Monza or Silverstone or Monaco. It was in Singapore. Under the lights of the Marina Bay circuit, at the very first Formula One night race in history, Massa pulled out of his pit box with the fuel hose still attached to the car. It caught, dragged, ripped. He had to stop. He had to retire. And in a race he was in genuine contention to win, he scored 0 points. 0. Now, the 2008 Singapore Grand Prix exists inside one of the darkest chapters in Formula One history. Nelson Piquet Jr. deliberately crashed his Renault on team orders, triggering the safety car at the precise moment that destroyed Massa's race and handed the win to Fernando Alonso. It was premeditated. It was cheating. When it came out the following year, Renault was disqualified, Flavio Briatore was banned from the sport, and the world discovered that the most suspicious race result of the decade had been exactly as suspicious as it looked. But the FIA never changed the result. They never gave Massa back his points. The standings were not revised. To this day, that decision remains one of the most debated in the history of the sport, and it is a debate that Massa himself reignited in 2023 when he launched a formal legal challenge to the 2008 championship outcome. Whether that legal case ever produces a different result, nobody knows. But the arithmetic is not in question. Subtract Singapore from the season, give Massa the points he was on course to score before a man crashed his own car to steal them, and the 2008 championship is not even close. He was robbed, and then asked to go win the title anyway. The third reason is perhaps the most human of all, and it is the one that separates the drivers who win championships from the drivers who deserve them. In the closing stages of a title fight, a Formula One driver has to become something close to a machine. Not in their car. In their mind, the pressure that arrives in the final 4 or 5 races of a close championship is unlike anything in sport. Millions of people watching. A team of hundreds depending on you. A country, in Massa's case, a country that had not seen one of its own wins since Ayrton Senna, carrying its hope in your hands. The drivers who win under that weight share one quality. They find a way to make the pressure disappear. They narrow their world down to the next apex, the next breaking point, the next lap. They become unreachable. Hamilton did that in 2008. After Singapore, after the momentum shifted, he raced the final stretch of the season with a composure that was almost eerie. He made mistakes, yes. He had moments of doubt, certainly. But in the critical moments, he closed the door. Massa, in contrast, carried the weight visibly. You could see it in his driving. The spins. The moments of over-aggression that gave away positions he didn't need to give away. He was racing with everything he had. And everything he had included the full knowledge of what was at stake, the full emotional weight of what it would mean, and the full memory of every point that had slipped away. He was not cold enough. and in 2008 cold was what the championship required. That is not an insult. That is possibly the most human thing about Massa. He cared too much to pretend he didn't. He loved racing too genuinely to strip the feeling out of it. In any other year, in any other finale, that might not have mattered. In 2008, it mattered by 1 point. And so we arrive at Brazil, October 2nd, 2008. Interlagos. Massa starts from pole position. Hamilton is 5th. The math is simple and brutal. Win the race and pray. For 46 laps it holds. Massa is in control. His pace is clean. His crowd is electric. With 3 laps remaining, the timing screens show what his nation has been waiting for. Then the rain comes. Not heavily. Just enough. A few drops on a circuit that had been drying all afternoon. Enough to change the equation. Hamilton pits for intermediate tires. Timo Glock, in the Toyota, stays out on dry weather rubber, gambling on the track staying dry enough to hold. It doesn't. As Glock comes through the final sector of the final lap, his tires are finished. He is sliding, struggling, bleeding time. Hamilton comes through behind him. The pass takes less time than it takes to describe it. Massa crosses the line first. The crowd explodes. His father, you've seen this footage, his father breaks down completely, overcome by something that has no name in any language. The Ferrari garage is pure joy, pure release, pure Brazil. And then the timing screens update. Lewis Hamilton, 5th. 3 more points than he needed. 1 more than Massa. The silence inside the Ferrari garage does not arrive like silence usually does. It arrives like a wave. You can watch it move across the faces in the footage. Realization traveling from person to person. The same expression, the same collapse, rippling through a room full of people who have just won everything and lost it in the same second. Massa sat in the car for a long time. His father had to walk up and tell him. That detail alone, that a father had to walk to his son's car and take away the championship with his own words, says everything about what that moment cost. Felipe Massa drove Formula One until 2017. He never came that close again, and here is the truth that the sport has never fully made peace with. Massa won 6 races in 2008. He outdrove his teammate. He outran expectations. He carried Ferrari's championship hopes further than anyone at the start of that year had a right to expect. He won his home race, in his final lap as a theoretical champion, in the most dramatic finish the sport has ever produced. He did everything a champion does. He just couldn't do it in a team that was fully behind him from race 1. He couldn't do it in a season where a rigged race cost him points that were never returned. And in the end, he couldn't do it with the ice in his veins that the final laps of a championship require. Was it bad luck? Was it stolen? Was it Ferrari's failure? Was it his own? It was all of it. At the same time. On the same afternoon. And Formula One doesn't separate those things out when it writes the record books. It just writes the number. 1 point. And a name that isn't his. Felipe Massa deserved to be world champion. He just never got to be.